everybody. So warm welcome. What we've wanted to do with the EdTech Hub is it's a collaboration of schools across the Midlands to provide an opportunity to learn, to share what we don't know, to share what we do. The first conversation we had, the first seminar was about, and it won't surprise you, I don't think, was digital poverty, the corrosive, what we'd seen through the lockdowns was the kind of corrosive nature of digital poverty, both at home and we were arguing as well in schools. We also heard from a number of schools about what they'd done and colleges about what they'd done to combat that disadvantage. And we thought we'd move on to a topic that seems even more relevant this week with news of the big absences. And of course, we can make the point these absences were entirely predictable, I think, in lots of ways. But hybrid learning, blended learning, how can we build on the use of digital as an institution, but how can we blend both the human approach and the digital approaches? How can we use online digital tools to maximize teaching and learning, to support teachers in the best way we can, and also to support learners? And what's interesting is that you're going to have, I would argue, it'd be good to hear from our speakers. I'll start with John probably to give us a picture of the RGS family. Is, how do you define hybrid? I mean, you've been a digitally rich school, John, the family of schools for quite a while. So I guess the leap to digital, the leap to using digital in the classroom, and also remote learning hasn't been massive for you. But what is it for you? Hybrid. How do you use it? And any kind of signpost to impact that we could share with other people listening. And then I thought I'd go to Zaytoon. You've got to head off early, so I thought you could pop in after John, if that's okay. And again, everybody, just to emphasise, it's lovely to be joined by Amarjit there. He kind of just got in at 2 minutes past 5, which is fantastic. Any questions, please feel free to put in the chat, and I'll try and look after that. But John, welcome.
Thanks, Ty. So what is hybrid learning at the RGS Worcester family of schools? I'll focus on the senior school, because we do have a representative from RGS the Grange and RGS Dodderhill here as well. And there are differences between how we use hybrid learning. So our definition of the senior school really is, at the moment, how we try and cater for pupils who are at home, generally with COVID, and also for the pupils that are in class, and try and use technology to make sure that the learning experience is comparable, that there's no reduction in the quality of teaching and learning if there's a barrier to access. And as you said, we've got a pre-existing digital culture at RGS Worcester, which meant that from the first lockdown, we were able to shift to remote learning on day one. The whole curriculum went online. Now we're in a very different situation. Thankfully, the children are back at school. But right now, we've got a few outbreaks in different year groups. We're still working in bubbles. So right now, my daughter's actually been learning from home all week. And her class, the COVID spread around in there. But she's been tuning in online. There's been pupils in class and using a variety of different tools. Simply from an iPad or a MacBook to screencasting, to things like Nearpod, etc., etc. We've been able to facilitate high quality learning despite the huge challenges of pupils being dotted around all over the place. And this isn't limited to COVID. For example, if a child broke, which has happened last term, a child broke their leg playing rugby, they now are able to access school from their homes using, again, technology. And our teachers have been specifically trained to facilitate hybrid classes. Again, using digital tools. Without digital tools, none of this would work. And the argument about digital, I think, has been won. It's now about how you do it and making sure that you do it well. So the impact you asked about as well, Ty. We've done extensive research on this, and pupils, parents, and teachers have all agreed that the ability to tune into lessons has mitigated learning loss. We've got data on this, which I think you've seen some of it previously, and actually included it in your report to the government.
Yeah.
So we haven't got everything right. I'm sure we can all talk about this a bit later on about how we've got things wrong and how we've learned from that. And that's part of the reason this EdTech Hub exists. We're not here to explain how brilliant we are and everyone should follow suit. We've done it our way with our technology, but other schools have done it their way with their technology. And I'm sure the things that we got wrong, other schools got right. So I'm looking forward to hear really the experiences of everybody else as well.
And so, John, when you put your EdTech jigsaw together, yeah, those that you talked about, Nearpod, you talked about, we've talked about various tools that you use. How do you judge purposeful EdTech? How do you pick a mix? What kind of criteria do you use? Is it just tried and tested, or are you happy to innovate? Or you've got a swish old title there, head of innovation. I mean, how do you do it? How do you decide?
Listen, I mean, I think there's a statistic out there about innovation. Something like 80% of them don't work. Luckily, the stats aren't quite as bad at RGS Worcester. But no, I'm very lucky to have a brilliant team around me at the 4 schools who've all got different cultures that they can bring to the table, different things that they've tried, different things, different ways of doing things, different curriculums. So I learn as much from my colleagues as I do from looking online, looking at Twitter, going to the Bet Show, talking to Apple Distinguished Educators, chatting to Google Certified Educators, chatting to the West Midlands EdTech Hub, chatting to you. Educators want the best for their pupils. None of us work for a big tech company. We just want the best. So we speak to pupils as well. We look at what happens in the classroom. We look at results, and I don't think there's one size that fits all, Ty, either. I think what works for me may not work in other schools, and that's not a limitation on technology. It's more to do with just pedagogy and pedagogical approaches. But there's different key stages, there's different subjects. There's indoors education, there's outdoors education.
Yep.
So when you take all those factors into any sort of use of technology, it does come down to personal choice to an extent as well. But amidst the sort of vast array of tools out there, we've limited it down to a small amount that we find useful. But we're always open to suggestions.
Okay. It's interesting.
Exactly.
Yeah, and just another quick question as well was, we talked at the height of a kind of national rhetoric that it was learning loss. There was a panic, wasn't there, to a certain extent about learning loss, and your figures were really interesting about that. You felt that your approach had mitigated learning loss. You'd done that through questionnaires. I mean, could you just say a few words about that? Because I wasn't aware that many institutions had done what you guys had done, which I thought was really interesting, and that is why we included it in that report to the Select Committee. I think was that you were quite clear that you'd mitigated that loss across the family of schools.
Absolutely, we thought it was essential after lockdown 1 to see what we'd done well, but also what we needed to improve on, and we made adjustments to the length of the school day, to the length of lessons, based on the feedback. We're 4 schools, so we got different feedback at different schools. Different schools made different adjustments according to the feedback they got. But we second guessed. There's a lot of schools did that. The first lockdown wasn't the end of it. Far from it. No, we're still in it now. So we wanted to make sure that we had evidence that what we were doing was working, that we could share with parents, that we could share with pupils, that we could share with teachers. We can share with the wider world, because we're all in the same job, really, aren't we? Trying to get the best out of our pupils so they can find their full potential. And having data that we could share with other schools, with other institutions was vital, really, not just for us, but hopefully for them. And we're still talking about that data now. And as you said, it went to government, and hopefully it's helped with that whole sort of drive towards moving for the use of meaningful technology.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks, John. Thanks for that overview. Zaytoon, welcome. And your role across the ATC Trust allows you as well to kind of look at schools that are in different stages of development, whether that's in the Midlands, up in Blackpool, or wherever your trust schools are located. How do you think as a trust about hybrid or blended learning?
I think with the pandemic and how it's come about, it's accelerated what we were already planning on doing, and it's the stuff that we had set up already. It was going at a decent pace, but with the pandemic, it's just accelerated it significantly. We've been able to introduce a whole load of new systems which we would never have thought about 2 years ago. We never thought there was a need for them even 2 years ago. But these systems are now in place that any child at any point in the day or in the evening can access their learning online. They can have full access to all the different curriculums. I've got secondary schools, I've got primary schools within the trust. So they can access their learning from home or from wherever. But we've taken it one step further. We've created something called a shadow curriculum, which sits on the back of our current curriculum, and it allows us to introduce things like enrichment opportunities for the students, links in some of those topics that they're learning to everyday situations. It brings in any support they might need, any special educational support that any child might need. So, for example, if they've sat through a lesson, they've not fully understood the lesson because of various needs, they can go and access that extra support within that lesson or after school. Or if they've really enjoyed that lesson, there's another challenge within there. So that, and behind that, I have a team of 19 people, committed teachers who are developing online materials. They're recording videos for their students, and it's very bespoke to those students and their learning. So in terms of our learning across the board, I would agree with what John said earlier on, that we have adapted to what we were doing before, and I think we've made it better, and we've delivered a more robust system, and it keeps all the children in mind, regardless of where they are, whether they're home because of COVID or whether they're home because of any other reason, that they can still carry on learning and they can still follow through.
So in terms of your approach, you see a key advantage for the students, which is control of, if I've got it right, control of pace and time.
Yeah.
So that's what you potentially you're stretching the school day.
Yeah.
But you're also able to drill down if people have challenges, don't get it the first time. I find that fascinating, that idea of a shadow curriculum.
Yeah. We've equipped the children. So in the school that I was working at, we were one-to-one with Chromebooks anyway. But working across the trust, even the primary schools, we're equipping them with the equipment to take it home, so that learning doesn't stop. And that's part of our digital strategy, to make sure that the children all have access to a device, regardless of where they are, and to have access to internet. And I think those two things, and then having something there in place that allows them to see where they are with their curriculum, and also see what's upcoming. The whole point of hybrid learning is that you have your in-classroom teaching, but then you also have the opportunities to do your independent study, work ahead of some of those topics and see what they're about, engage them with those topics prior to them being taught in lessons, and it allows a better flow within a lesson. So for us, I see a very win-win situation. Yeah.
So how just before I go to Amarjit, I'm just worried about your signal there as well, Amarjit. It'll be there next, I thought. just in terms of bespoke, how bespoke is bespoke? When you talked about, this group of 19 teachers creating materials, but also recording, what are they, feedback videos, or are they challenge videos?
So we have set up a whole recording studio for them with a green screen. We've given them webcams. We've bought in portable camera systems for them. So for science teachers, if they want to demonstrate practicals, they're demonstrating those practicals. They're uploading it onto. We have a student dashboard that houses all of our videos and the curriculum. And the curriculum maps as well, all this stuff that teachers do in the background and SLT do in the background to develop their curriculums in school, all of that is open to the students to view and see where their learning journey is going. And from there, then, when we say bespoke, they are very, very bespoke to our children. It speaks to our children. A lot of our children come from very, very diverse backgrounds and very poor backgrounds. So we, in order for them to have aspirations and go somewhere, we showcase all of that within the shadow curriculum. Where can this topic lead you? Where can this subject lead you to? What kind of opportunities are available to you with the local colleges that are around you? Where can this lead you to? So all that encompassed within that shadow curriculum.
What's powerful about it as well, it's curriculum materials delivered online from people and that rather than sort of buying something anonymous off the shelf, then is that a major advantage as well for
Absolutely. When we first came up with the idea, you always going to have some staff or some people will say, well, why don't you just buy this in? It's the same what we can already get online. Yes, you can, but those students can't relate to those people. They can't relate to that lesson because that lesson was taught and delivered in a particular way. For example, I'll give you an example of our maths department. In order to work out equations, we use something called the wall technique. We don't use triangles or forming the triangles. We use a wall technique. Now, that's so unique to our children that when we speak about wall technique in science, they all automatically know that technique to work out equations. So in those videos, those techniques are referred to with those names, and it again allows it to be so home to them that they know what we're talking about, and it's not a new process that they think they're learning.
So you've got different schools in the trust at different levels of maturity on that digital journey.
Yes. So we have some who we are still trying to get some sort of infrastructure in place because they've been under the council for such a long time, and things are taking a little bit slow. But although the infrastructure is not there, we're already working with those teachers to get the curriculum up to scratch, embedding the EdTech aspect of using the computers in the classroom and really getting staff to understand that they don't have to use technology with every single piece of activity there is out there, and really make that formative judgment as to where it needs to be used. So we use something called the TPAC framework, which allows us to look at pedagogy and the technological approach to it. And then alongside that, we have some primary schools who are using technology from the reception right the way through to year 6 and are excelling in the use of that.
So the TPAC with those circles that you're trying to hit that spot in the middle in terms of don't just use technology in a kind of willy-nilly way, use it with an intent for pedagogy.
Exactly that. I think once that's embedded and understood by the teachers, and that it's that changing mindset as well, it's a change in what you're doing, and when that shift happens, teachers, and you use the word innovation, teachers will start innovating their lessons and making their lessons more purposeful and facilitating those lessons instead of doing teaching.
So I guess, sorry to interrupt, I guess part of your role is to nurture them on that professional development journey.
Absolutely. So I'm in there to train the teachers on how to use that technology, but also to get them to understand the pedagogy behind it and really get to understand why they are using it, not just here's a tool and here's how to use that tool. We don't want an outstanding a lesson that looks really flashy with all the use of this technology, but the kids are not learning anything. We need them to understand why they're using that technology in that class.
That's excellent. Thank you. Just to remind everybody on the call, do put any questions in the chat, and we'll try and circle back to them Surprisingly, we're doing okay for time as I come to Amarjit, whose Wi-Fi is not solid, so we're a bit worried there, sir. Hello, welcome. You're from the Dame Ellen Pinsent Special School.
That's right.
Just to say welcome, and I think your perspective from special education is absolutely vital to this conversation. So thanks, really appreciate you joining us.
Most welcome.
How do you approach it then in your school, this whole notion of hybrid, mix and match, in-person teaching, traditional teaching plus digital? What's your recipe then for blended learning there, Amarjit?
Well, the initial, it's not something we had done beforehand. The pandemic sort of put us all on the spot. Initial, like everybody else, there was a lot of panic. What do we do? Which way do we go? So myself and our head of IT, we were looking into different avenues of what's going to work. It's also convincing parents of, why we're using iPads at school, especially due to how they use them at home with just gaming. And a lot of our children, obviously, we've got moderate learning difficulties, some with severe learning difficulties, some with some attachments and fixations, and it's a real fine line. Obviously within school, we're managing their technology when we're there, through like using guided access, through Apple Classroom, and the staff are now equipped with, they know how it's going to work, and parents really had a struggle. And it was also the resources that we use, the sensory resources, the communication aids we're using. Parents didn't have access to those at home. In some ways, it was a great educator for parents. They were beginning to see how difficult it can be to sort of, communicate with the children, and also what it benefited, or how it benefited parents was they were beginning to realise that, hold on, we can maybe do some more of this at home. So parents were constantly connecting with us, saying, oh, this really worked with them at home. And this all can happen through digital technology. And as mentioned earlier, it's something that wouldn't have been possible, even just a few years ago. And I think we're almost fortunate that this pandemic came when digital technology now is rife, and everybody's becoming more and more able just through smartphones and smart technology.
So parents then, I was just putting that in the chat as well, that the way that you talk about almost patient empowerment of the parental community is parents and carers is amazing.
Absolutely. I mean, I had parents calling saying how children were responding to staff voices. When you upload any word, could you please put your voice on there? Because I remember one parent saying, I can't get this young lady to do her work at home. As soon as she heard your voice on this, and she said, she almost sat down at the table and said, I need to get this work to Mr. Marvel wants this work completed. And
the power of the teacher voice there.
Absolutely, it's fascinating. What our children respond to. I mean, as we're all aware, every child is so different.
Of course.
And at Dame Ellen, there's a huge variety of children, and they all respond to work in very different ways. And at school, as I said, technology is managed in such a way now, and we're getting better and better day by day. I constantly connect on Twitter, and I haven't been doing it for very long. Just a quick insight, my kind of introduction to technology was through my background, which was textile engineering, and I remember repairing a machine for two elderly ladies who asked me to access their computers at home to sort their bills out. Yeah. And I've only recently got into education, and the first thing I thought was these children who are the most vulnerable in society, how are they going to access their bills in future? How will they manage their finances? How will they manage day-to-day living if technology is not a factor? And and then through an insight, I asked the whole staff, I said, who pays their bills at the post office? And nobody put their hands up. And then eventually we're getting round to now thinking, technology has to be used as an aid day to day, and and through hybrid learning, through school learning, it's just getting better and better day by day.
I mean, maybe it was an advantage that you personally came from a different sector. You talked about textile engineering, and it's EdTech is not just for a pandemic, is it?
Oh no, absolutely not. No.
So what state when you talked about your learning curve and you used the word panic, controlled panic, obviously, but we all had butterflies, didn't we, at that time? But
yeah.
You're not going to go back, are you, as a school?
No, definitely not. I mean, we have been a one-to-one iPad school for a number of years now, but I think the way we were using them was probably needed improving. I was late. I went back to education late, and I've completed my degree only a couple of years ago. Yeah. And I focused my Keystone projects on iPads in an autistic classroom, and that's what really got me going. And two of our governors have just done doctorates in a very similar subject field, so they're constantly inputting and saying, try this, do it like this. And as a school we are learning. I think as a country we're learning, and
yeah.
And it's taken a pandemic to really realise, especially for special schools, that iPads and technology can be used at home in a controlled manner. It's as I said, it really is a learning curve day to day.
Well, that's superb. I think if nothing else, an institution that's involved in learning has to be a learning institution as well. I mean, I know it's a bit of a cliche. Ruth is focusing in the chat about that almost parents have been forced by the situation, and indeed schools, to be far more engaged with their children's learning, and that we need to carry on with that to enable young people at home to also, and parents to feel empowered. Do you think that the relationship with parents has obviously strengthened? It's strengthened educationally, but you talked about almost in a kind of therapeutic way that working with their youngsters has also transformed, not only educationally but in terms of communication. I mean, that's a win-win, isn't it, for you?
Absolutely. I mean, I remember a project we worked on, with especially some of the early years children.
Yeah.
I had one of the early years teachers said, how can I use this device at home? What am I going to do? And creating sort of parents and children relationships that, a stronger bond. And we've got children just to go and photograph different textures around the house. And, we had children who were like sort of fearful of grass. And they would go out and say, look, let's touch this grass, let's take a photo. And just creating collage of photos was something that was supporting their development. And, and it's building relationships with parents and siblings. And, as I said, I always look at sort of, is it going to be purposeful? What are the children going to get out of this? And we've now got children who are prepared to go outside, who are prepared to look at, mini beasts, who are prepared to, try and find a branch and touch a branch. Whereas, once upon a time, that just wouldn't have been, something that would have happened at school. And that parental power has really supported that.
We've also got some really supportive comments from Paul, that talking about the need for a personalised teaching so that parents can see exactly what and how their child is being taught. I think the barriers between teacher, Paul, and what's happening in the classroom, it's not a hidden world, it's not a secret garden as it's been said, and also that he says to you, Amjit, it's great to hear about your work in this specialist setting. Tech can be a liberator and make a great difference. Thank you for those comments, Paul. Also interesting comment, I guess, about professional sense of how are teachers concerned, Margit, about opening up their educational lives, their classrooms to parents? Is there a kind of sense of maybe those boundaries that some people perhaps hide behind, or we all need? I don't know, but are sometimes teachers threatened by this opening up?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel so. I mean, I've only ever worked in the special sector, which, and what we find is it's the parents. There's some parents who find it hard to accept maybe how special a child is. Some are obviously that they're understanding, and those parents we find, they're working with you all of the time, and they're trying to better and see what we can do, how we can, form that relationship. I think like with many parents, some just expect too much. Some think there's going to be, the movement's going to be a lot quicker than what it is. It really is, as you say, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. Learning, including us. But yeah, it's a touch and go situation. With some parents, relationships, really do build. But I do think the home learning has definitely supported that bond with school and home.
That's great.
Yeah, so on a positive, I would say the bond is stronger.
So just final comment, you talked about guided access in school. And you talked about perhaps it being a slightly, you used the word fine line earlier. Have there been some mistakes in the sense that, in terms of access, what has been accessed? How did you negotiate? Those protocols that John mentioned in the chat, those expectations, safety, security, etc., etc.
Yes, we've got some children on the spectrum who are very, very able with technology. They know how to access so much sort of different material, and that was initially a concern. And as we've developed as a school, developed with technology, my background isn't technology. It's just something I've got into the last few years, and we had to assess and collect data saying who's accessing what.
Great.
And now it's so controlled now within the school. I was supporting a new member of staff yesterday saying this, and she was fascinated by how she could control her devices through her own teacher's device. And she said, "Oh, this is the tool I've been waiting for." It's just so brilliant how we've
That's great.
To get better and better.
It's great to hear, and I think your openness about the journey is fantastic. We've got that well-known town in the West Midlands, Lima, Peru. We've got a comment from Jessica. Welcome. I know you struggled with the hours in which when we were broadcasting from, and she said the family relationships have really been enhanced in terms of pandemic lockdown. And that teachers have been more valued by parents. That's a lovely, interesting, great thing to hear. And thanks again, Margit. Really appreciate.
Thank you very much.
Really appreciate your inputs, and good luck with the journey. And if you can stay with us till 6, do. But I understand if you've got to head off.
No, I'm good to stay.
Great. We love data. Sophie, welcome to your first West Midlands EdTech Hub meeting. You're kind of well-established member of the RGS family. Not only did you go to the actual school that you are now teaching in, but you're leading on digital at is it Goddard in Droitwich? Superb Droitwich. I know, I remember it. Tell us a little bit about your approach there to hybrid, how you choose tools, some of the insights that you've gained, some of the impact, and then after that I'll go to the very patient Richard and Matt. Sophie.
So I think for us at Goddard Hill, it's about ensuring consistency, especially as we're an all-girls school. So I think it was quite important, and still is as we carry on with hybrid learning, to keep their confidence up, especially when children are out and have been isolating for long periods of time. And I'd say the use of technology has enabled that, especially with the little ones, where it's very fast-paced learning. We're doing phonics and different sounds. It's really enabled us to consistently keep up with their learning, and I would also say help with their confidence. It's really, really helped their confidence grow. And I think it's nice now to almost sometimes in a lesson flip it onto them and say, this is the task you've been given, but what do you think? What app or what device would work well to actually show what you've learned or researching, which I think is a huge benefit from all of it, because it's almost putting it into their hands and enabling their confidence to grow, which beforehand we may not have thought of doing.
That's interesting. Choice and purposeful use of tech. So for you, I mean, you as an institution, you as a school, this wasn't a big leap, but what did you learn, in terms of Margit's sort of learnings, plural? What did you learn about hybrid, blended?
I think I learned the vast array of differentiation as well, that you can actually, obviously in the classroom you always differentiate for the different children that are there, but actually with hybrid learning you can do it to a much deeper level, and you can, instead of just saying here's the homework task, you can differentiate that by using different apps. I mean, you can make the learning a lot more personalised, which I think is what I've learned from it, which is definitely something I'll keep doing, more so than you would have done beforehand. Because I think beforehand, before all of COVID and lockdowns, teachers almost were this is the lesson, this is the task, it was quite regimented. Whereas now it's a lot more fluid. Actually, yeah, if you've excelled in this, then we'll send you off into another app, into another area. So today in a year 2 class, where they were doing they were almost making their own invention using notes and markup tools about the environment, but actually some of them were really excelling with that. So then you get them on to use Kahoot or Quizlet and different apps they can use to make quizzes about that, and that's giving them the confidence to use them, which I think is really good.
So they're setting their own pace again. It's
Exactly, definitely.
And do you feel also, I mean, just going back to Zaytoon's point, not only are you giving kids, young people that perhaps a sense of the curriculum map, the curriculum scaffolding, the journey, but you're also able to sort of allow, as you said, you allow people to speed off into mastery and depth, and you're stretching the time. Is that some of the positives for you?
Yeah, absolutely, definitely. It's giving them, it's being able them to stretch further than they may have before, and using those different tools that they're almost gaining a toolbox that will equip them as they go up, which I think just highly beneficial for them, especially as the world technology is growing, and they need those tools not only for when they're in school, but when they go to university, when they, if they get whatever they decide to do in their lives, those tools will be really, really valuable for them. And I think also, as we said about the parents, helping with those connections with the parents. I know in the early years they use lots of Seesaw, and it's helped with the communication back home, which has been really lovely and almost nice to share more so of what you're doing in the classroom than you would have before, so they can see it in action.
What about, these last 2 years, they've been lots of ways a kind of tragedy and a triumph, I think, for the teaching profession. How do you feel as a professional now, 2 years on? You talked about a digital toolbox for kids. Have you changed?
Yeah, I think I've definitely become a lot more open to change. I'm quite a planning person. I like a good list. Actually now, I'm a lot more open to change. Actually, if the lesson goes off in a completely different direction to what you would have thought before, then that's okay. And I've also, during the 2 years, finished my MA in education, and my dissertation focused on the pedagogy of learning during the pandemic. And I talk quite a lot about multimodal learning and how actually that's opened up, I think, to a lot of teachers using this multiple approach of different ways of learning. And I included the TPAC framework as well that we mentioned.
Oh, I bet you had. Yeah, I bet you had the TPAC in, and a few other frameworks, no doubt. Yeah. Are we getting there then? Are we beginning to understand how pedagogy with technology is the same but different?
Definitely, yeah. I think we are, definitely, and I think all of this, the acceleration of how it had to be because of the lockdowns has been a huge benefit, because it's enabled lots of people all the parents that may not have done it before to be on the journey with us, which is really, really good.
So, final question before I go to Richard. If you were to say to an institution, a teacher that, you know, who's never put their toe into the digital learning water, has felt quite reluctant. I don't know how they've probably escaped not doing any digital learning for the past 2 years, but if they haven't, what would you say to them?
I think I'd say that they'd be. I think I'd say they'd be surprised how it could aid. That it's not. I think I'd say that technology is not a tool that's going to take over you as a teacher. It's a tool that will aid you as a teacher, and it's something which is almost like a jigsaw piece, which will make the depth of your learning and teaching better. And it's not something that's going to. I think a lot of people who are a bit more reluctant to use technology are worried it's going to take their role as a teacher, and they're a bit like, oh, you know, I can do that. I don't need that app. I don't need that technology. But actually, by using it, it's enhancing you as a teacher, not holding you back.
Does it increase your workload?
No, it's great. I mean, we've been using an app, Goddard, and I know the other RGS schools have been using it as well. It's quite a new thing, but it's brilliant. And it's really helped. Like they do like a task, and then it sets them off into specific. They're called nuggets. They like areas, but in that the assignment gets marked itself, and then that sends them off to differentiated tasks. So I mean, in that sense, it saves a lot of workload with differentiation, because you're not sat there thinking, right, they need that. Actually, it sort of sends them off, which is brilliant as a starter or plenary task, or even as a prep. You say, right, you did this assignment. Now I want you to spend 20-30 minutes doing the nuggets, which are specified for you. So that's really, really useful.
So we've gone from bite-sized to nugget learning now. I love it. Let's find the gold. Yeah, let's find the nuggets. Thank you. Really interesting insights there. And have you had the result of your MA yet?
Just waiting for it. But I've had it all confirmed. They've received it all, so I'll let you know.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Thanks so much, Richard. The nuggets of hybrid, the nuggets of blended. How do you at Mere Green Primary? How do you think about it?
Yeah, we haven't referred to it as nuggets as of yet, but I think maybe that's a new little buzzword we could include in.
Oh, you're allowed to have it. Toolboxes with pallets.
yeah, pallets, nuggets, all of it. Yeah. So we've been one-to-one since around 2017 and became a regional training centre for Apple in 2019. So for us, moving to remote learning back in March 2020, similar to John with the RGS schools, it was quite a seamless approach. We were able to put technology straight into children's hands from the word go. Children have been, from years 3 to 6, had been taking their iPads home already, so they were used to being able to use them to enhance their learning outside of the school walls. And we make sure that we've got a high level of CPD for staff, so 100% of our teachers are Apple teachers. So we were ready to go with high quality teaching and learning. So over the numerous lockdowns there were, I think 3 maybe, we managed to see by the end of it that the mitigated loss of learning was much less than some of the schools in the local area that weren't and didn't have access to the same level of technology we did. So our data, after multiple assessments towards the end of last year, was in line with where they would have expected to be if there was no pandemic. So we really did manage to mitigate that learning. An additional positive of that, which has been touched on numerous times, is the parental engagement and them as stakeholders. I think for us, parents were always slightly unsure about the one-to-one project. We really tried to engage them, but I think there were always some barriers.
Interesting.
Not understanding it exactly and worried that that traditional teaching wouldn't be the same. But after COVID, we really saw a turnaround in the appreciation and the understanding of the power that technology can have. We got some really nice parental feedback, which has gone a long way to be able to really engage all stakeholders with our one-to-one project. But moving back to sort of the traditional teaching approach, when we came back after COVID, we really thought, well, what can we keep in our toolbox after we come back to school? What worked really well from remote learning, and how can we keep that going? So, we looked at sort of how we can make sure that education technology is used to amplify the sub-process of effective teaching. So, those recorded modelling videos that children can access at their own time and independently, that can allow them to structure their learning at a pace that suits them. High quality explanations and assessments, and maximising those synchronous and asynchronous learning opportunities. So we've really tried to make sure that what succeeded in lockdown, we've kept in the curriculum to sort of make sure we don't stand still with our digital vision. We try and improve it. But in addition to that, as a trust, so we're part of the Arbitrary Learning Partnership, we've looked at as you touched on previously, the digital divide and the lack of equitable access, not just across the country, but also potentially across our trust as well. So we've got schools like near Green that are in quite an affluent area, but also schools that are in a less affluent area. And for me, it was a big thing that, is it fair that just because of the postcode that my school and my children are in, that they should receive a better quality of education than children in another postcode, which of course it isn't. So on return to COVID, that we're currently in the process of this now, we're looking at digital solutions to provide a one-to-one approach for children across our trust to ensure equitable access and to really sort of ensure that each child in the trust has the same access to technology and education as everyone else.
Interesting. Just as you were touching on digital poverty, somebody asked about, did you put in additional support to pupil premium pupils? And clearly you did.
So yeah, so how our scheme works is we have a mixed approach. So we purchase one-to-one iPads for 2 and 3, and then we have a parental contribution model for 4, 5, and 6, which allows us to maintain the scheme. That may change as we move towards a trust-wide approach, but we ensure that, yes, pupil premium children have the same access to or SEND children that any child would have purchased the iPads themselves. So we really ensure that there is equitable access to technology.
What you also, it just struck me, you also get the prize for mentioning synchronous and asynchronous. I think we did really well. We got through this 46 minutes worth without mentioning those words, which became the kind of buzzwords, didn't they? Live and not live. So you seem to have really got that trick there of refreshing and renewing your digital strategy. It wasn't just this monolithic. It's very much what Sophie was saying. There's a kind of sense of real movement and creativity. Same with Amajit as well. There's a real sense that you're not just stopped there and go, we're the experts. There's something fluid and creative and imaginative about what you're doing that it really translates. Actually, it's contagious a little bit, Richard. Sorry to use that word.
In a good way, hopefully.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
I think it's massively important. If you look at the educational landscape from 2017 to now, it is incredibly different.
Yours, you mean? Yeah.
I know there's a lot of buzz around things like cognitive science and aspects like that. And I would say that as we really have gone down that route, and it's about ensuring that the technology complements your pedagogy and teaching approach, and that you adapt the technology to that and not the other way around, just like the curriculum.
Yeah.
So it's providing staff with the continuous training to be able to really enhance what they're doing, be confident in doing so. I think that after we came back from COVID, we really reflected and said, well, look, yes, we've been one-to-one since 2017, but we probably rushed that a bit ahead to ensure we were ready for COVID with some of the younger year groups. So on return, we really ensured that we were providing high quality CPD for staff that was also based in research and evidence-based approaches. So looking at the EEF toolkit for technology and making sure that teachers were not just being told how to use technology, but they were on that journey themselves and discovering the best ways to use it, but also with a research mind as well, which I think is quite important.
Okay, evidence-based research, EEF toolkit. What's the biggest thing you learned, you yourself?
Is this from the last 2 years, or
yeah? No, I'm not going to take you back to 2017. That's decades ago. But just what have you learned? You as Richard, what have you taken as a professional from this, or you as a person?
I think over the last 2 years, especially, I think the flexibility and the sort of resilience of all staff, the children as well, has really shone through.
Yeah.
But I think it's really sort of using all the terrible things that happened with COVID, almost as a jumping step to be able to take things further and build on what we were already building on, and using technology to amplify what we already do and enhance it. So things like especially with high quality modelling videos, really high quality home learning opportunities involving the community and involving parents in the children's learning. So I think it's just, for me, without sounding cliche, it's been quite energising.
I can get that sense, yeah.
To continue to have to try and not reinvent yourself, but to continue to try and strive for that offering the children the best possible education possible.
Does that percolate across the Arthur Terry partnership?
We're getting there. We're in the early days as a trust, but especially across Mere Green, I think that it's contagious, the staff's ability to bounce back and be accepting of change, and they've really taken on and worked together on this journey of digital transformation, and it's excellent.
That's excellent. It's great to hear. I mean, it's changed all of us in lots of ways. Matt, you've changed, because I'm used to seeing you in a suit and tie. I have to say I'm slightly shocked. I think that's because you've been in Forest School or wherever you've been today. But you've got a really tough job, because you're right at the end. There's a number of themes that have come out. I think parents, I think us as professionals, how people have re-energised and reinvented. I think there's some amazing positives, I think. What are your reflections on what you've heard and what you've done as part of the family at RGS?
I think I'll start by saying this isn't a tough job going last. I think it's a bit of an honour, to be honest. On behalf of sort of the Worcester RGS, the RTC, in a combination really with the Worcester EdTech Hub, it's an absolute privilege to be online. There's 20 of us online. We've got Jessica from Peru. We've got James from Atlanta in America. I could probably go for a beer with all of you, and we'd have a fantastic evening talking about stuff we believe in. I think it's the connection aspect, It really is. We're online because we want to help each other. A few years ago, it was probably a little bit more competitive, wasn't it, in the field of, what are Mere Green doing? What can we do to improve? But actually, love to chat to Richard and see what he's going on. Love to go and visit his school in Amargit. I think, it's nice to make that personal connection with you. We've been sort of talking on Twitter for the last year or two. We're now face-to-face online because we actually pretty believe in the same thing, don't we? Putting pupils first. What can technology do to actually enable us to do that? It's an absolute privilege to just be on here listening to you. It's the least effort I've ever put into a session, and probably the most I've ever got out of it. Awesome work, everybody, in terms of what you're doing. We started sort of going into that lockdown with the graphic on the screen of how everybody just has to step out their comfort zone. And I don't think ever, Ty, have we had a position where EdTech has had such a significant role to play. People are looking towards it now in terms of helping and enhancing learning. And I think, that's very hard to argue against. It really is.
Do you think we're winning? Are we
I
winning
think
the EdTech argument? Because there's still some cul-de-sacs and some blockages, though.
Yeah, I think if it was half time, I'd say it's 1-1. I think it's everything to play for in the second half. But I think, building this community is so important. It really, really is. And I think staying connected, having that more sort of human connection.
Why aren't we further advanced? There's Richard, using, and look, they weren't buzzwords. They're really important pillars, evidence-based, research-informed, using some of the kind of EEF insights. They're not the only people that have got insights, but, it seemed to me that we should be further on now. We've got a schools white paper coming up.
Yeah, I agree with you. And it's just a shame it's taken something like a global pandemic, hasn't it, to give the whole sector that little bit of a kick in the right direction. And I think for everybody to step out of their comfort zone and actually to look at the enhancements, what can tech do? Saif was talking about, apart from the nuggets, it's about how can we improve learning? Is it harder work that we're putting in? Well, no, I think if we're sensible about this, it's not.
Is it generational though as well? I mean,
I think that's you could argue that, but actually, I think it's more just having this. It's our job to educate other people, but actually, what do we like at learning? Are we open-minded? Are we open to change? Because that's what we're asking the pupils to be. And I think it's so important that we actually lead what we believed we want to happen. I don't think we can teach like we did 10, 20 years ago. I've been in teaching 15 years ago, and it's a different landscape.
Yeah, and Ruth, Ruth says, everyone is starting from a different point on the journey, and she's spot on, isn't she?
Oh, without a shadow of doubt, Ruth, and it's great you can join us tonight, and I hope you've got something out of the session. And I'd love, Ruth, for this not to be the end of the discussion, but for you to be able to connect with other people, these 20 people in the room, because they're all absolute assets to the EdTech sector. So I've got a few notes here. I think people have made some incredible points. I think what we've seen really is that human contact. When we record a video, your teacher's there when we record. I made a huge mistake this afternoon. I walked into a classroom with my Forest School kit on and beanie, ready to go into the outdoors with my Year 4s. The teacher was actually having a one-to-one conversation with a pupil who was at home with COVID. The whole class were part of this conversation. And I sort of walked in. I was like, "Hi guys, are we ready? Oh, sorry." And we're online. We got a parent there, sat with a pupil, talking about what they're doing this afternoon. So it's very much embedded, and I think it's having that open-minded approach. I do agree with what you've been saying about parental engagement. As a result, we're sort of looking at what we're doing. We're by no means perfect, are we, John? We talk on a weekly basis about how we can refine, how we can learn from you guys, how we can sort of put pupils at the centre of what we're trying to achieve. We're working on a digital workflow at the moment to have that consistency across the school, where we've got these markers of parental engagement. What are our expectations? We've opened up a big online sort of trial to go fully digitised feedback versus sort of a balanced sort of feedback. And I've got to be honest, if we pitched this to the staff a few years ago, I think it would have been a very different response. But we've gone down this route, and we had about 98% of staff wanted to trial full digitised feedback. That just wouldn't have happened a few years ago. And there's got to be something in this, because they believe that actually what we can do from this is going to be more beneficial than what we were doing before. And by trialling it, we've got to have that open-minded approach. The results then we're going to invite the parents in. We're going to share the results with them, and actually they're going to be on board with where we go with this. Because we can't just make huge decisions and expect parents to sort of to follow. They need to know what we're doing and why we're doing it, and it all comes down to that why and what we're trying to achieve, Ty.
True, and I've got Benjamin, really interesting comment from Benjamin Stanley, reinforcing what Ruth said about starting points, but also it's pushed his trust, our trust, capital T or small t, our trust forward in tech. So yes, I think we've probably had the biggest trial of EdTech that we've seen. We've had people that have perhaps not used EdTech in their classrooms before, either remotely or in person, using it. It's been the biggest trial of EdTech. and he also emphasises how different each school's approach is. And I think, what I've heard is some common themes about that tech, rather than undermining the professionals, actually validates professionalism. I think that's one of the points that Sophie was saying. It's changed you as a person to be, rather than it's got to be like this, to let's see where it goes. I can bring it back. I can scaffold it. I can have all my outcomes, but maybe I can get there in a different way. I thought that was fascinating, and that sense of renewal, an experiment from Richard and Amarjit. I thought that was superb, and Zaytoun's had to head off as well. But it's interesting that she was talking about her schools being at different points, in a trust. And I guess it now being 6 o'clock, we did promise to finish on time. A really big thank you to all of our audience. We feel really privileged that you gave up your valuable time, whether you were from Derby or Lima or Atlanta. I think you said, Matt. We really appreciate it, and also clearly we really appreciate our speakers, your frankness, your honesty, your willingness to engage, share your learning. It's what it's all about, John. And I have the honour to have chaired it, but also I have the honour to say to John, do you want to say the last couple of words, Mr. Jones?
I think you summarised it perfectly, Ty. It's just a huge thank you for everyone who's spoken this evening, everyone who's asked a question, and everyone who's turned up. The whole purpose of this is to communicate, is to build, is to develop, and is to learn. And I've learned a hell of a lot from everybody, so thank you.
What should we do next? We don't know yet, do we?
No.
But we're expanding. Not only are we expanding in Peru and the States, but we're also expanding in the West Midlands. And I think our view is that there's lots of teachers that would love to talk tech. And it is about professional development. It's about creating that sense of honesty, I guess. That's what I've heard today.
Totally agree. I think Matt actually spoke to me on Friday about an idea he's got of doing something like this, but possibly in person. And I think we can do that now, according to certain people. But obviously not straight away. But looking maybe at that term of actually doing something, getting together, putting a panel on a stage and learning face to face. I think we could do something very exciting.
That's fantastic. Thank you all. Lovely to see some old friends again as well. Really appreciate it. Beards and all. Nice. Actually suits you. All the very best. And thank you so much to our audience from Peru, the West Midlands, or the States, or Worcester. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.